Well, welcome to the Week in Sports Cars, part of the Marshall Pruett podcast collection. As always, with thanks to the Justice Brothers, TorontoMotorsports.com and the Sports Car Championship Canada for helping us to make the show happen. With Marshall Pruett, I'm afraid a little bit poorly sick ahead of his trip to Sebring. It's left to me, Graham Goodwin, to pair up with him. That's Stephen Kilbey. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Graham. How are you?
Stop it. To just put the hard yards ahead of what's going to be some very hard yards and some very bumpy bumps. It is the 12 Hours of Sebring this weekend, Stephen. You're about to hop onto the Big Silver Bird and make the trip. I'll be holding the fort back here in the UK. Excited?
Yeah, always. I love Sebring so much. I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourite tracks. 12 Hours, my favourite. Might be my favourite, certainly my favourite endurance race in America. It just always delivers the goods. And if the weather's nice, absolute bonus after the trips to Qatar and Rolex this year.
It was chilly in Qatar, wasn't it? But we'll see. That's chilly, by the way, with a Y, not a single L and an E. Nothing to do with Nico Pino. It's 56 cars for the second Enduro of the year, the completion of the 36 Hours of Florida, as we like to term it, after a frankly utterly brilliant 24 Hours of Daytona. Let's take a run through the 56 runners and several other riders. Lots of storylines to come, and we start, as we should always start, with GTP. He says, looking relieved that I've not thrown him under the bus with yet another curveball. It's going to be 13 cars, and we'll come to the 13th and additional car a little deeper into this. Porsche took the win, but there were signs of real pace from plenty of others, including BMW, including Acura right at the end there. Cadillac pretty much haven't they, had a start of the season to forget with the huge incident that took out one of the cars at Daytona and the incident that took up effectively both of the cars in Qatar. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, well, let's start with Porsche then, because, I mean, coming out of Qatar where it was a bit of a struggle for them, to put it mildly, it's kind of easy to forget that it wasn't that long ago that they came out and won Rolex in fine fashion twice in a row, and be looking to deliver on a first win at Sebring for the 963 this weekend. And I like to think they've got a real shot at it.
I think they have. I mean, we can recall, can't we, the carnage towards the end of the race,
2 years ago,
which was a couple of years ago. But I mean, look, it is a race that can throw up a shock result. A Porsche win would not be a shock result, but it would be a welcome one for Porsche, amongst others. Of course, Mr. 24 Hours, Christophe Bouchou's, he's
massive
hero.
fan, isn't he?
Massive fan, Nick Tandy, and amongst that. It's a race that all these guys, girls, teams, brands, all of them will want to win. It is absolutely one of the top races of the season.
Yeah, 100%. So Porsche then looking for a breakthrough for the 963 on that circuit. And let's not forget, I mean, up and down the order, a lot of these lineups have been slightly trimmed. We had a lot of 4-car teams, didn't we, at Rolex? So we're seeing teams revert back to
four driver teams,
sorry. Reverting back to some of the drivers that we're going to see throughout the season. Now we're through Rolex. So if not Porsche, then who? And I'm going to throw this to you, Graham. There's the oddity of last year Acura winning the race with Wayne Taylor Racing. So Acura, you'd think, we'd be pretty confident that it was a really good result for them last year. But the team that delivered that victory for them, the RX06, has gone off to Cadillac, and Cadillac on the other side of this, as you kind of pointed out, desperately up for a turn in fortunes after a pretty messy 24 Hours at Daytona. If to pick between those two brands, quite difficult.
But this is the great thing. We've got 3 teams we've mentioned already. Penske with Porsche. We've got Wayne Taylor Racing now back with Cadillac, and we've got MSR with the Honda guys looking after one of those 2 cars. Already, just with 3 manufacturers involved, it is an absolute parade of talent on the pit gantry, on the pit wall, in the car, strategically in engineering terms. And then you add in the rule set, and the MSERB rule set, I repeatedly say, does dole out massive entertainment, particularly in endurance, the endurance format. And boy, is this one of those. If the weather stays as it looks like it's going to, in the 80s, we think, it's going to be a lovely day to watch what could be a very, very exciting race.
And so let's talk about a couple of bits of driver news, I guess, as part of this as we go up and down the list of these teams. And we've got at Wayne Taylor Racing, was originally slated to be Alex Lynn as the third driver in that car alongside Jordan Taylor and Louis Delatraz in the 40 Cadillac. He wasn't able to take part in Daytona because of an illness, and he's not going to take part in Sebring either. So he's been replaced and swapped out by Brendan Hartley, who was part of Cadillac's effort at Daytona. So he gets a second start this season, and that'll be definitely something to look forward to, just to see what Brendan can do. We know how talented he is.
And to be clear, that change has been made simply because Alex missed Daytona. It's to do with the familiarity with the team, keeping that group together.
And he didn't test at Sebring as well, so Alex. So he's missed out on running ahead of this weekend. So they've gone with the hand that was part of them in Florida, and that, for me, the Jordan Taylor Louis Delatraz car, always, whatever circuit it is, I guess you'd have to say they're a contender. But Louis Delatraz in particular in last year's race was absolutely phenomenal at the end, and was a massive part of the reason that Acura got that win. So if he can rediscover that form in, lest we forget, just the second race back at Cadillac for WTR, and normally you'd say, it's still early days, but as like Maya Shank, I guess, showed coming back to Acura at Rolex, these teams at the level they operate at don't need very long to suddenly start competing at the front.
So that's Acura.
Yeah.
Porsche, we know, established players at the front, pretty much wherever that 963 starts nowadays. Cadillac, we expect to be right there. The car's been strong at Sebring in the past. Marshank Racing are looking very well set with that car as well. BMW. Now, BMW, start of last season, looked pretty much nowhere. We started to build form through the season. And all of a sudden, towards the end of the season, into the beginning of this season in WC terms with WRT, all of a sudden look like contenders.
Yeah, I don't know it's a combination of things, isn't it? The teams are certainly getting better at operating the cars, be it WRT or RLL. The general knowledge based on the data they've gathered is certainly, for that first season of having the WC program, has clearly played a part in this. They've updated the car for this season, and that's made a bit of a difference, certainly on the braking side. And it was just kind of nice to see some further evidence of progress. We saw WRT come on strong towards the end of last year in WEC, then to see RLL do really well at Daytona, and then to see WRT again showing at the start of their season in WEC that they have real potential to get some big results this year with that car. I'd love to see BMW do something really special here at Sebring, because it is another one it's such a punishing race. If a brand with a car that they're looking to push forward, if you were going to circle a race on the calendar that's one you want to win and show off what your car can do, this is surely going to be one of them.
4 more to talk about. Let's talk about the 2 privateer cars. Proton competition with the number 5 Porsche with Neil Gianni, Tristan Vautier, Nico Pino. And the 85 JDC Miller car, another Porsche, the bright yellow car, of course, with Tiemann van der Helm, Jimmy Bruni, and just named Nico Muller in that car. So ex-Peugeot hypercar driver, moved over to focus principally on Formula E, but back in a top-class prototype. This is a race that has been won by privateer cars.
Yeah, over the years, we've seen some real shockers, haven't we? I'm thinking, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking the likes of Orica with the Peugeot when they delivered that amazing victory, and seeing Hugh Schoenack in tears on the gantry over the start line. Yeah, especially with the rule set, as you've said, time and time again, Nims, if you're going to be a privateer, certainly in with an LMDH car, this is the sort of place you want to get, have a car entered, because it could be a late yellow, you're on the lead lap, if you've got the right tyres and you've got the right fuel to get you to the end in that final stint, anything can happen. And we've seen cars come out of absolutely nowhere. Once it gets darker, Sebring, things start to get feisty and there's incidents everywhere. You can make something of a race where throughout the daytime and into the night, as the circuit temperature's starting to cool, you could be nowhere first 3 or 4 hours of this race. And then suddenly, if you've got the setup that gets you pace towards the end of it, pull something out of the bag. I'd love to see it.
Stay out of trouble is what it comes down to. Lead lap is absolutely everything. And then it comes down, doesn't it, to that, all too often it comes down to a brave strategy call that could put you into position, track position in the final dash of the flag, that we could see from. It seems every year we see something spectacular in the last 10 minutes at Sebring. Usually spectacular good, sometimes spectacular bad. Let's move on with that phrase to the final 2 cars in GTP. I think it's fair to say neither of which come into this race as favourites to be featuring for the win, for different reasons. Let's talk first about the number 63 car.
Yeah, so the Automobilia Lamborghini Squadra Corsa, the Lamborghini factory car, which is just doing the 5 endurance rounds this year and obviously no longer part of WEC, the SC63. So spotlight's on again, isn't it? It was at Daytona. You know, they've scaled back the effort. So if they come out and said that they want this to be a customer-focused program going forward, well, they've got to prove the car is something that customers, teams, if there are any, that are going to want to buy. And so far, it's not looked fantastic, has it?
So we had early retirement with cooling problem in Daytona. The car then went to the Sebring test, but a further problem, and only did, I think, the first session.
Yeah, right? missed an entire day of running.
Missed the entire day of running. For me, say it out loud, basically, the 63 with Mirko Bortolotti, Romain Grosjean, and Danny Kvyat. There are 2 options here for the team, supported by Riley, of course, Riley Motorsports, helping the team this season after the departure of Iron Lynx. They've either got to be reliable and get that car a long way towards the end or at the end, or they've got to be fast. And I mean really, really fast. Preferably both. But you've either got to show well at the front of the field, or you've got to be there at the end. Anything other than one of those 2 things, then I think there's going to be some significant questions asked about just exactly where this program is.
Yeah, there's only so far you can take it before you have to start being a bit blunt with where this is all going. And if they don't get anything out of Sebring, that leaves them with 3 races this year to make an impact.
First of which is in June.
Yeah, so it's not going to be easy for them. What should say though is that it is a year on. It is a circuit that they have run the car at before. Rolex and Daytona was not a circuit they'd raced at back in January, so they've at least got some data to draw from. They've got familiarity with that circuit. They did finish the race last year, finished 7th. It was actually one of the better performances of the car all year. Yeah. So it would be a surprise, I guess, because it's such a punishing circuit. But the 3 drivers behind the wheel of the car, they don't need any introduction in terms of their ability level. If there is pace to be found in that car, they're going to find it. It's just a case of, have they gone away and done the work to fix this car reliable and making sure that it can be a reliable enough package to contend here as the GTP class gets bigger, gets stronger.
It gets more competitive.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen, isn't it? We saw it at Daytona. The depth of that pack was greater. The same again with the sister class in the WC and hypercar. The packs are bigger and more reliable and quicker across race distance. There's no place to hide. Brings us to the final car in the class.
Skip over it, Graham. It's a boring one.
It's a little bit of deja vu after us slavering over the beautiful Aston Martin Valkyrie on its global debut at Qatar. Single car here for Heart of Racing. It is a stunning looking piece of kit. Comes under the Aston Martin Thor team branding. It's the 23 car for Ross Gunn, Rum De Angelis and Alex Riberas, all 3 of whom were part of the efforts in WC. Car is in a blue version, the Heart of Racing blue version of the same livery. few impressions from what you saw, and we can't get away from it, what you heard trackside.
Just awesome. And the best thing about it was, one, it was louder than I thought it was going to be, and two, it was at a circuit that doesn't lend itself well to noise because it's flat, there's a lot of open space, and the fact that you're standing in that paddock at the back of the media centre and you could hear that car circulating specifically. You knew exactly where it was on the circuit just from the noise. And I love cars like that, and we just don't get enough of it. And to see it somewhere like Sebring where there's a lot more, I mean, Sebring again, another very flat circuit, but at least you've got a lot more paraphernalia around the track to kind of reverb that sound. In the campgrounds, it's going to sound awesome at certain parts of that circuit where you can get really close to the cars, because at Qatar you can't get that close to them in a lot of places. So yeah, any fan who's going this year to Sebring, I'm sure everyone's got their eye on that car in particular anyway, but just prepare yourselves because it is spectacular.
On full noise, it's going to be amazing. I think there's going to be particular crowds down at the hairpin, watching and listening to that car as it on the crackling overrun under braking coming into the turn, and then on full noise coming out the turn. It's going to be something to see and hear. You've heard us talk about it. You'll have seen the pictures, seen the video. If you're trackside this year, lucky old you, because you're going to be telling your friends on social media, you're going to be swapping clips, you're going to be looking at all sorts of fun and games. Boy, oh boy, have they injected something back into sports car racing, and they've not even got to pace yet.
No, and that's the thing, is that, you know, it's all very well and good, it's going to sound great, it's going to look amazing, but any of us who watched Qatar, and, you know, was a challenging weekend, as everybody expected, for the entire Heart of Racing team and everyone from Multimatic who was operating the two Valkyries on site. Any marks of progress is going to be a good thing, and we've said it time and time again, it's such a tricky place to take a car for the first time in a championship. But there were signs of that. They got a car to the end of the race, didn't they, in Losail? And if they can get their single car to the end of the 12 hours, that's another big progress marker for me. I don't expect them to be fighting up the front. I don't necessarily expect them to be anywhere near the lead lap by the end of it. That would, if they were on the lead lap at the end of the race, wow, I'd be very, very impressed at this point.
Yeah.
But you know,
pace is one thing they'll be looking for. Reliability
and the doors hanging on. That would be good, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, I think we can point a finger at Marco Sorensen for maybe being a little ambitious with the speed he could bring the car back with. And maybe they put a longer piece of string on the other side of the door to see whether or not they could grab it this time. But, I mean, that for me, that was the visual moment that defined its weekend. But, you know, there is a bit of hashtag wait and see as to just exactly what reliability levels and pace levels are achievable. I want to just see some progress through this season from that package.
Yeah.
But for now, I'm just glorying in the fact that it exists.
Yeah, and I think there's plenty of people who are doing the exact same thing. And the other thing to look out for are the free drivers. You mentioned Ross Garden, Rome DeAngelis, Alex Riberas. Free drivers as well that are kind of getting up to speed with being in the top class, with driving a car like this. They're going to be improving, you know, at probably a rapider pace as the car itself does. So I just would like to see him getting involved in some battles, and just like to see what this car can really do when it's driven properly in anger. It's
a fair point. I mean, they've all three of them got a lot of experience in GT cars, less experience for all three of them in prototype machinery, although some experience. This IMSA program does feel like a sort of academy effort that is just helping them to get up to speed in a challenging environment, but to just get a lot of miles more quickly than perhaps their more experienced colleagues in the rest of the WEC team.
I love it when teams and brands show loyalty to people who've delivered strong results and have given them loyalty back. And you don't see that often. There are certain brands in motorsport, be it likes of, I guess, Porsche and Ferrari to an extent with AF Corsa, and certainly Corvette Racing over the years, have kind of built a reputation of once you get your foot in the door and you become part of that family, you get treated as such. Always had huge respect for that, and it's very clear that
I mean, hanging on to Ollie Gavin for years after
unbelievable
year
for all those years. How many years at Le Mans was it he didn't win?
Long time, I mean, well past his peak. I mean, I'd say a decade at least past his peak.
The Botanki years were a tough watch, weren't
Yeah,
they?
but I mean, Ollie Gavin, it was good to see them just supporting him in his, what can we call this, his sunset years.
Yeah, that sort of heritage driver status.
If I say sunset years, I sort of mean, the 2010s.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'd love to see
Love you, Ollie.
what Hutter Racing are doing, and like the fact that there'll be plenty of people, I'm sure, that would have expected when they came out and announced their driver lineups, that would have expected this massive all-star cast of people who have won Le Mans before and doing kind of what Genesis is doing, which is assembling a team of people who have got major wins in prototype racing and success behind them. But no, they've shown guys like Ross Gunn through Aston Martin and everything he's done for that brand as a youngster, showing the likes of Alex Riberas and De Angelis. If you show us what you can do in a GT car, we're going to help you through, give you this opportunity, which is a really massive opportunity for all three of them in career terms to fight in GTP.
Right, that's GTP. I'm going to ask you for what you think might be the winner.
You're always doing this with me now, Graham. You get away with it. You never have to do predictions. I look like an absolute...
Yeah, but sorry.
I do anyway, but...
Who pays the wages?
So what are you asking me? Go on then.
I want the winner. And by the way, I mean, nothing other than success is going to be tolerated.
Just having a look at this list now. God, there's some dross in this class, isn't there? Look at it. Unbelievable.
It says that with a tongue in his cheek. It is stacked, isn't it?
I'm going Wheeling Cadillac.
Okay.
Jack Aitken, Earl Bamber, Fred Vesti.
You're a bit of a Jack Aitken fan, aren't you?
I think he's got real ability, but I think more so the Action Express team. I feel like Cadillac are due a bit of a resurgence after Daytona. And if it's going to come from anywhere, I could see it coming from Action Express because they know that car so well. And the guys like Earl Bamber and Fred Vesti clearly feel they have a lot to prove going into this. So really excited to see what they can do. That's my shot in the dark. But of course, they could finish last. Who knows?
Let's move on to LMP2. You're going to quickly skip through LMP2. 12 cars, all Orica 07s in that class. The competition was there throughout the race. The drama came, of course, after the race at Daytona with the elimination of Tower Motorsports. So at some point, there's going to be a kind of slightly uncomfortable exchange of trophies and watches, I'm afraid, this coming weekend.
That is horrible, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is horrible.
I mean, particularly from the driver's point of view, for the team's point of view, nobody went into that. They say it was a component failure. They didn't go racing knowing that was going to happen. They came, having spoken to pretty much all the guys as they came out the car and through the press conference. Absolute joy. And what must that phone call have been like?
I wouldn't want to make it.
No, absolutely not. But there you go. Tower Motorsports will try to come back punching. Hopefully not literally. United
Not while
Autosports,
handing over the watches,
no.
certainly.
United Autosports, it was that took the win for the number 22 car in the wash-up for that. There was a change of driver for United Autosports in the other car, the number 2 car. It's going to be Nick Bull with Juan Correa, ex-Formula 2 racer, and Ben Hanley. I think that is, for the most part, the only major change, is it not? In the... Oh, no, sorry, apologies. There is, of course, another one, and that is for into Europol.
And Era as well, but we'll come to into Europol
so
first.
When I said that's the only change,
you meant no.
So the 43 car, Jeremy Clark steps in. We'll talk about Jeremy for a moment. Steps in for John Fowle. John reported to have an injury.
Field.
Did I say John Falb?
You said John Falb.
Oh, I'm really sorry, John F. So John Field, my apologies, has reported of an injury. Hope we're going to see him back. Feel we will see him back. But for now, Jeremy Clark steps in. We didn't know much about Jeremy before the Asia Le Mans series. So the first time I saw him race was Sepang in last year, in the Asia Le Mans series, an AF Corsa Orica with Ollie Pla and with Patrick Byrne. And it's fair to say, as a bronze, he was a head-turner. I think if he knows Sebring, and I believe he does, he could be quite the package here. So that's one to watch, Jeremy Clark, in what is always a well-prepared car, the 43. So he joins Bijou Garg, already a Le Mans winner, Tom Tillman, a Le Mans winner, in the 43 into Europol car. Era Motorsports.
So yeah, Kakuota joins the lineup there, was part of Acura MSR Rolex 24, and he's a hugely exciting talent to look out for. And he steps into a team that won this race last year, so the expectation is going to be high for that level. And if I remember rightly, Era pulled off an absolute blinder on strategy before the end of the race, before the final caution, to get that win. They know how to win a big race at Era.
Emerge. I mean, we've talked about the opportunity for strategy in GTP. It is emerging in my fellow years. Emerging as one of my favourite things about LMP2 is the opportunity for strategy to make a huge difference. You know, fortune very often favours the brave in LMP2, but to be brave, you've got a real strategic nous, and somehow the opportunities of this one-make class where things can be so close, it just offers up, with a late caution or whatever else, the opportunity for the really big brains on the pit wall to just throw something into the mix that makes you think, why have they done that? Oh, that's why they've done
They're
that.
on a massive fuel save for 4 hours.
Yes, indeed. So, you know, of that lot, I mean, that's 4 of those cars mentioned. Beyond that, CrowdStrike Racing by APR with George Kurtz, Melter Jacobsen, Toby Sowry. That car's going to be right up there. And when we talk about strategic now, it's anything that's got APR and David Leach attached to it. You can't look much further beyond. We've mentioned Tower. They'll be up for the fight. TDS, PR1 Matteson, with Rodrigo Salas, the bronze driver amongst that group. Pratt Miller, Pietro Fittipaldi named this week as part of the Vector Sport efforts in the European Le Mans Series. Riley with their number 74. The Lewis Perez Compact, Matthias Perez Compact, and Nick Nielsen effort for AF Course the 88. And then, of course, Spike, the LMP2 Dragon, with PJ Hyatt, Dane Cameron and Johnny Edgar. That's another car. You can't look very much further beyond if you're talking about top 5 and better. And
Johnny Edgar was particularly special when he was in the Sean Creech Ligier at this race.
He was, and then you saw what he did as well in the GT car. That kid is becoming quite the talent, isn't he? This is a real tough one, and much as I do like throwing you under the bus with asking you to make predictions, this one I do somewhat feel for you. So I am going to ask you to do it. So give us your top 3.
Oh God, even better. I'm going CrowdStrike APR, the 4 car, the Kurtz Jacobsen Sowry car to win.
Okay.
Second, I'm going to go for Era, so the Ota DHH Toby Luca car for second. And third, I'm going to go with AO Racing.
Yeah, I think they're 3 good calls. You know, they're all wrong.
But
you know, it might well be the same 3 in different order. Might be 3 completely different.
What's it they say about monkeys and typewriters and Shakespeare? Something like that.
But here's the thing: all those are wrong. Okay, but I'm not going to tell you how they're wrong until after the race. I think it's only fair.
What I'll say is that I'll let you tell Stuart Cox it's wrong that CrowdStrike by APR are not going to win.
They'll lead. They'll lead by probably I would think several laps, Stewie.
Oh, I see.
They can't help what's going to happen the last lap to them. Into GTD Pro, the first of the production classes. 11 entries for the 12 Hours of Sebring, down from 15. Is that right?
Yeah, it was 15.
I think a record 15. It's Mustang and Multimatic Motorsports on a double for the Floridian Enduros. But lots of stories beyond that. Corvettes and BMW rejoin their fight, and they'll be tooling up, I'm sure, at the local Bass Pro shop for whatever's going to happen out there. Tommy Milner will be bringing his towering credit card debt.
I was going to say exactly the same thing, his massive credit limit.
But, I'm sure it'll be all car. No, it won't. Well, it's going to be carnage.
Sebring's often been the place in GT where there's been some absolute door bangers towards the end of a race.
Completely
It is
crackers.
like the moment the sun goes down there, all the drivers go, "Oh, no one can see me doing this, so I'm just going to do it."
And by the way, I've not had confirmation it's happening, but if you are at the track, do pop along to the TorontoMotorsports.com trailer, where there might well be something there that's a little bit special for you to take part in that remembers the happenings we're talking about at the Rolex 24 Hours a Day.
The Tommy Milner Memorial
Door.
Yes.
Might well be on site.
Fantastic.
So we'll see. So it is Paul Miller Racing with a pair of BMW M4 GT3 Evos, the car that made its debut at the Rolex 24. The 2 Corvette Racing by Pratt Manor Motorsports in some commemorative colours for Mobile One.
Yeah,
this
looking
weekend
swish.
with the white and blue, looking really good. Pfaff Motorsports, Lamborghini, they will feel as if they were robbed at Rolex 24, properly quick, but actually a problem that took them out of contention. Vassar Sullivan, and will not be the last time we mention Vassar Sullivan, the Lexus won last year?
Yep, one in
did.
GTD Pro because, of course, it's a brand new car and it's expected to be the quickest.
Stop it. No, so it's not. Proton competition with the Claudio Schiavone, Mattia Cressoni, Richard Leitz, number 20 Porsche, the 2 Ford Multimatic Motorsports Mustangs, and then the entry completed by AO Racing, Rexy, in his braces.
In his braces, yeah.
Yes.
A new look to the front end of that car.
Indeed.
Exciting.
And then Dragon Speed with the number 81 Ferrari, Albert Costa, Davide Rigon, and Giacomo Altoa in those cars. The change they made in terms of the way that cautions are managed did make a fundamental difference in terms of the way the packs were reconstituted. Yes, there were moments where you had GTD cars in amongst them, but what it did give us for long periods in the Rolex 24 Hours was full packs in the classes they were intended to be in.
Yeah, the racing I thought improved dramatically because of it's a pretty simple rule change, but I thought it genuinely made a big difference. And for my money, created some of the most dramatic moments in recent memory purely because there weren't GTD cars in amongst the GTD Pros and vice versa, where you've got this odd situations all the time where drivers are kind of half fighting cars because they don't really need to get around them for position, but they do. And yeah, it just, for me, it works so much. It was so much nicer to see those classes treated separately.
Pro racing we love, but somehow an all-pro lineup in a quality GT car is just something to behold.
Yeah, when you've got the talent and ability that some of these guys have got, when it's all on the line in some of these big races, and on a circuit like Sebring that is so punishing, when you get towards the end of the race and you're seeing some walking wounded out there and you're seeing a lot of the cars sort of, driving with like they've crashed into a sort of tape store. Brilliant. There's nothing better. Oh, and there's a GTP car straight down the middle up the inside while they're trying to make a move into the hairpin. Brilliant stuff. So yeah, I can't wait to see who's going to come out on top in this one.
For me, with the Corvette coming on strong, with Mustang having had a much, much stronger race than we've seen from anybody running the car, with the possible exception of Le Mans last year for Proton, this class beginning to come into its own and punching at the weight you would expect from a manufacturer-backed class.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we did see what I hope is the sort of tone setter for a narrative that will go and rage on throughout the season in GTD Pro, where you have got, even if it is just the likes of Paul Miller and Corvette and Ford up the front, taking each other's wing mirrors off to try and win these races. It's what you want to see, and it would be good to see. I wouldn't necessarily like it to be quite as door to door as perhaps it was at Rolex between Paul Miller and Corvette. But if we get to a stage where those two teams come together on track for top end positions towards the end of this race, I'd like to think it's going to be exciting.
Exciting would be one word one could apply for it. So it is like LMP2, where it's so close, and it's completely unfair to expect you to call the winner for this. So I'd like your top 5.
Top 5? Kidding me.
And remember,
they're all wrong.
Yeah. Well, the other 6 are going to be offended. So,
well, I'm going to go with the 48 Paul Miller BMW to win.
ooh,
the Hesse Harper Crone car. I just think that's just an absolute bucket of talent. And I think the M4 Evo is a fantastic car. So I'm going to go for them to win. I'm going to go for the number 3 Corvette second, the Garcia Sims Juncadella car.
Okay.
Third, I'm going to go AO Racing, Heinrich Bachler and Picariello.
Okay.
Fourth, I'm going to go Dragon Speeds Ferrari. And fifth, I'm going to go with the 4 Corvette. So Corvette, the only brand to get 2 cars in the top 5.
Well, astonishingly, they're all wrong as well.
Yeah,
So, you know,
and
who'd have thought?
well, yeah, precisely. The thing is, it's really hard to gauge with Ford. Can I ask you for what you think the week's going to be like for Ford? Because now I've just read off that top 5. It's like, how can I not have either Mustang in there?
Well, I think
after Daytona,
with the wide open spaces Daytona, it sort of suits the Ford's major selling point, which is an awful lot of straight line grunt.
yeah,
And you know, it's still pretty early days for the Mustang. I think they'll show well. I think they'll do well to last with the strength that we saw from the cars at Daytona. But I think we're going to see a much stronger full race performance from the Multimatic cars. Yeah, there is a reality here, you know, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, and only 1 or 2 exceptions. Nothing to say that you shouldn't see 5, 6, 7 cars battling away, as we did in the WEC with a not dissimilar field, albeit without the full pro lineups in there. In the same way as we're seeing in Hypercar, we saw in GTP at Daytona, pack racing is coming back into fashion, and I absolutely love it. It's about being heads up with your peers and with traffic, whether that's faster or slower traffic. And GTD Pro with, you know, fully fired up pros with a little bit needle in the mix there across this field is going to be pretty special, I think.
And there is another point to make about GTD Pro and GTD for that matter, is it's torque sensors again, and it's the second major race meeting for that technology in the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. So we'll get more of an indication of how well the class is going to be balanced with it. They've had, you know, there's a lot of time, tons of track time at Daytona for the teams to get their head around it, and for the rule makers for that matter. So it'd be interesting to see how that translates as we head into Sebring, and see whether we'll get more of a flavour of, is it going to deliver even closer racing in GT as we head through the season? We'll find out a bit more this week, won't we?
We will. And you mentioned the torque sensor side of things, and that comes into more focus for one make in particular when we look at the 20 car down from 22 at Daytona.
Yep, correct.
GTD class. Huge array, variety there. AWO, of course, the winners with the Corvettes, the number 13 car at the Rolex 24. They'll be looking to see what they can do to add a second win. The manufacturer, we were talking about having some issues through the week, certainly got on top of it by the end of the week, but it clearly put some of their teams on the back foot. Were the winners here last year, Mercedes-AMG, Winwood Racing took the win. What do you expect in terms of the storylines coming out? A pretty packed 20-car grid.
Well, like you say about about torque sensors, it was a tricky Rolex for Mercedes-AMG because it was the first real weekend and opportunity for them to get their head around that tech. And lest we forget, Winwood won this race last year. They won Daytona last year, but they also won Sebring. They won both races. Will they find a way to look a bit more like the Winwood we saw last year at Sebring? The AMG GT3 is a cracking car around that circuit. So I'd like to think that with Rolex under their belts and that initial pain of trying to get up to speed with torque sensors behind them, that Winwood could be in there. Who else was impressive when we look back at, I mean, AWA, clearly.
Yep.
You've got to say, what are they going to bring to the party after a phenomenal
the
win? The
DXDT car was up there as well until the fire that Charlie Eastwood had, which caused by all things the rear light cluster that was lost in a contact incident and found its way into the engine bay, basically melted and ignited. And that caused, with presumably some kind of other leakage, pretty big fire for that car. So they were unlucky. Corvette does look strong without a shadow of a doubt. We don't really know where we are in terms of that survivability around the bumps. You then look at the other cars in the class that have got heritage on that circuit. It is a car killer, without a shadow of a doubt. You already mentioned one of them, which is the Lexus in GTD Pro. There's a very strong lineup for the Vasser Sullivan crew in GTD.
Yep,
Jack Hawksworth, Parker Thompson, and Frankie Montecalvo. There's a potential winning combination if ever there was one. And then all the way down the order, whether or not it be the multiple Ferraris we've got in play, the Triasse cars, the Conquest car, AF Corsa, Heart of Racing with the Aston Martin, that's always really impressive. Tom Gamble leads the 27 car. Moving over from the WC Hypercar effort, Casper Stevenson, one of 2 silvers, and the Canadian rocket that is Zach Robichon. Then you get into the AMGs. You've got the Lamborghinis, pair of those, and the Gradient Ford.
I was just going to mention that it was a really challenging Rolex for Gradient, getting their heads around a car they hadn't had much time with at all before they got to Florida. Interested to see what they can do in their second run around with the car, because it is a team that, for my money, are really well run and organised. So looking forward to seeing what they can do now they've had a bit more time to get to know that car. And if you strap in someone like Joey Hand, factory talent that he is at the end of a race, with a car that he knows that well, anything's possible. Also looking out for Wayne Taylor Racing and their Lamborghini. Didn't quite see, I don't think, what the team would have liked to have done in the opening race of the season, but Danny Formal, Trent Hinman and Graham Doyle are just a really nice trio. There is a really good bond between the 3 of them, so looking forward to seeing what those guys can do. But yeah, I mean, trying to pick a winner here is just as challenging, even though it's a slightly smaller class. It's no easier to try and pick who you think is going to win this race. But thank God you're not going to have to put me on the spot and ask me, Graham.
I get it's entirely unfair to ask you in a 20-car grid to predict a winner. So if you give me the top 7.
I'm not doing the top 7. You pushed it there. Top
3?
Go on, I'll give you the top 3.
They'll be wrong.
Yeah, they will be wrong. Wright Motorsports were pretty good, weren't they, at Rolex? So
always are.
Wright Porsche. I'm going Wright Porsche in 3rd.
Okay.
I'm going with Heart of Racing's 27 Aston 2nd.
Okay.
And sod it, I'm going with Vasser Sullivan's Lexus, because they just defy logic in that team to win the race in GTD with the 12.
Checking, and I can confirm they're all wrong as
well.
Well, not that far out.
Amazing to be wrong. It's consistent though, isn't it? Consistently
utter
wrong.
Consistency, which is what we look for in sports car racing.
Yeah.
Do
I win the Wingfoot Award? Oh, wrong championship.
No, wrong championship for that. That's the Rolex 24. That's the Sebring 12 Hours. You'll be on site with RJ O'Connell for Racer.com and DailySportsCar.com. Beyond that, all sorts of developing storylines through sports car racing. Some good stuff for both Racer and DSC this week, with conversation with Thomas Loudenbach, which took place in Qatar. Some highlights out of that one?
There were quite a few. I mean, it was quite a fascinating half an hour with Thomas Loudenbach.
Thomas was lobbying, wasn't he?
He was lobbying, yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair to say. No, he was, to be fair to him, he didn't call a load of media into a boardroom and get us all, get our microphones out and record him just going on and on and on about the future of the class rules. It was him responding to questions that were asked of him, which he had some really interesting answers to. So yeah, he was asked a lot about where he thought this entire formula was going in hypercar and GCP, because we are at a point now where, although it still feels brand new and shiny with this many factories racing on both sides of the Atlantic in the 2 big classes, we're not a million billion miles away from having to work out what comes next.
Yep.
And with hydrogen being talked about for a number of years now and being delayed multiple times, and more manufacturers just sort of seemingly queuing up to join the likes of LMH and LMDH programs, there has to be a question asked: how do you sustain this when we get to a point where this rule set does come to an end, or these cars do reach their natural end of life? And for Thomas Loudenbach, he made some points about what he would like to see. He would like to see all the manufacturers come together away from the rule makers and decide what they want going forward and present a kind of framework for the next set of regulations. And he thinks
Sensible.
and he thinks that should be done sooner rather than later. He thinks, he said he doesn't think it will necessarily happen, but he's in an ideal world, he'd rather there just be a kind of a cost cap and just tighter regulations. He's definitely one. I think this is something that we could see way down the line, but he would like to see a move to one platform rather than having the split of LMDH and LMH. He would like one platform which isn't necessarily one or the other, but a more potentially of a mixture. And he made the interesting point of every manufacturer has their own priorities as to what they want out of a program, what they want out of a car. And you had the point that if you asked the main bosses of every manufacturer, what are your priorities? It would be a really interesting spreadsheet of data, because you've got likes of Ferrari who are really interested in the chassis, Toyota are interested in developing their own hybrid system. Some manufacturers are more interested in just cost control and like the idea of having spec parts. Some manufacturers are looking more on styling cues and just having an LMP2 partner that they can just develop a car quickly, like Genesis coming out of nowhere. So he does make an interesting point that every brand would be good to have their say, and he would just like to see it be more streamlined going forward. Now, the interesting part of all this is that this debate and him talking about this comes at a time when I think we're not far out of hearing some news from the likes of IMSA, ACO, FIA about what we're going to see in the future for hypercar and GTP. I don't think it's going to be long before they tell us what their vision is. And my understanding from some conversations I've had is that we're going to see the regulations extended further than they were. So the current regulations, as they are now, extended again.
So the option would still be there for LMH.
Correct. So we did see an extension last year at Le Mans to the end of 2029, which I think was a massive part of getting the likes of Genesis and Ford to go, yep, we're in. And we hope McLaren will say soon, yes, we're in as well.
Which then gives us confirmed, if McLaren did, that would be 3 confirmed additional manufacturers beyond the total we've got across the 2 championships that welcome the new class by 2027.
By 2027.
But that then gives you a problem.
Yeah.
Because you then stall, because you're then not in a position to be able to have a long enough program beyond that, to start beyond that, to get through that tricky learning curve that we've seen time and time again. The hypercar manufacturers struggle through a first year and then start to blossom as they understand the formula. So that's where we start to get a problem, which is why an extension makes sense, because, Stephen Kilbey, I think it's fair to say that there's a group beyond that.
Yeah.
So we're not going to talk about who they are.
No. But yeah, I have it on very good authority that we are looking at 3 or 4 manufacturers beyond the ones confirmed now.
Beyond the 3.
Beyond the 3 that are taking a serious look at this. But in terms of getting a program together, they need time. So my understanding is that we will see this rule set extended through 2031.
Yep.
And that the hydrogen rule set, which continues to be discussed behind the scenes, but there isn't any full rule set and regulations written down and printed yet, that is going to be pushed back again to the end of the decade from 28 to
Which
2030.
makes sense, bearing in mind the relatively recent commitment by FIA, I think I'm right, to liquid hydrogen. So it's a switch from where we were, from gaseous to liquid hydrogen.
Yeah, and for the likes of the H24 project, that is a big shift, because that was based on gaseous hydrogen stored in tanks in a car and that technology, and that is now being shifted to a liquid hydrogen project to meet that regulation. So you've got that project, you've got the likes of Toyota, who I believe you spoke to at Qatar, that are still keen on pursuing hydrogen. There are other manufacturers looking at hydrogen technology, be it Alpine, Ferrari have looked into it and are developing technology for road cars. They've got the tricky bit is, if you're not interested in hydrogen, this is why the extension makes sense, is that we were going to reach a tipping point where you'd come to 2030, and if there's no continuation of this current rule set, and hydrogen at that point is the full focus on trying to get this class off the ground, you could go from 10 manufacturers to 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And you don't want to just hemorrhage manufacturers in one go. So it's a smart move to push this class. And I think right now, the hybrid technology we've got is going to still be relevant at that point.
Absolutely. So just in summary, okay? In summary, therefore, what we expect potentially to hear at Le Mans, before Le Mans, or in the immediate aftermath, is an extension to the current rule set that's been so successful in gathering this astonishing array of manufacturers. I'm going to come to another question in a moment on the back of that, that the hydrogen rule set might sensibly be delayed by a year or two to take account of the switch in emphasis on the most relevant technology, to liquid hydrogen. But that all of that comes with the prospect of attracting an even further group of manufacturers beyond, not just beyond what we've got in IMSA and GTP and in Hypercar in the FIWC, but in addition to the 3 manufacturers, 2 of which have publicly committed, and we expect McLaren to join them, that we are talking another group of, I think you mentioned 3 or 4, that of every prospect of joining that list.
Yes, that's entirely right. So really boring, isn't it, at the moment in sports car racing, Graham?
So I'm going to add 2 things to that. One of them is going to come by way of a question. I'm going to add again, when we write the stories that we do for Daily Sports Car and for Racer, and when we write that people are considering programs, we do so with real care. We do so making sure that we get as much information behind those teasers, if you like, that we possibly can. And that comes with 2 provisos. Proviso number 1 is things can change. So things that may well have been true 6 months ago or 12 months ago may not still be true. It comes also with the proviso that it depends what question you ask, and it sometimes depends who's asking that question. So sometimes when you read that some of those stories may not be quite true, then that might not be true in itself.
Yeah.
There's no story I've written, not one, in the last 12 to 18 months about what may or may not happen in Hypercar that I'm not still standing square behind. But it may be that it's a little bit later than we thought. I'm not even going to give you clues about which that was. I think most people that follow what you and I write can remember what we've written that's not yet happened. I'm absolutely convinced that pretty much everything we've written about is still very much in the mix. And it's fair to say more beyond that. Here's the final kicker, though. That's important because what that gives us is not an ever-growing field of hypercars. Because here's the reality. Manufacturer programs are funded against a whole range of parameters, some of which are performance related, some of which are limited by the amount of investment the manufacturer is prepared to guarantee, and therefore are time limited. So we do expect some of our current manufacturers not to be around in 2030, maybe not to be around in 2027. Do we not?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that from some conversations you and I have been having in the background with various people in both major paddocks concerned, that we are not a million miles away, it feels like, from seeing some of these manufacturers
start to make it clear that it's sort of mission accomplished. Or not.
Or yeah, go the complete opposite. There's only so long you can go spending the level of money that they're spending at a time like we're living through now, where the automotive industry is in real flux and choppy waters, and there's been so much uncertainty. These are the areas where if you're not delivering the goods, or if you are delivering the goods over and over and over again, at some point you've got to say, is it worth spending the money? Is it still adding the value?
So the final point from us as we wrap this show up is going to be this, which is there are exciting times to come. There's also going to be some news that's going to be less welcome to come in the coming months and very small number of years. But it's still exciting. You still have to kind of pinch yourself and think, where were we coming into the COVID years, when the hypercar regulations were stumbling, blinking into the lights, and to look at what we've got now, to look at what we believe we know we've got coming, what we believe we've got coming, and beyond that, what you don't yet know is coming. But there will also be moments where people who back a brand or a driver will have reason to think that's not the greatest day of my life on the internet. Watch this space for all of that to come. Exciting time to be part of sports car racing, to be following it, to be writing about it, to be talking about it. I'm going to say thank you to Stephen Kilbey for taking the time this afternoon. He's on a plane tomorrow, Tuesday, en route to Florida and the 12 Hours of Sebring. We're going to say thanks as well, of course, to the Justice Brothers, to TorontoMotorsports.com. Remember, look out for their sales trailer at Sebring, and to the Sports Car Championship Canada. More about what's going on in Canada from RJ O'Connell in the Sebring week and beyond. For now, he's been Stephen Kilbey. He's got all of those predictions wrong again. I've been Graham Goodwin. This has been the Week in Sports Cars, part of the Marshall Pruett podcast, and we'll be with you from Florida later this week.